Yo, yo, we got another lore video, kinda, sorta, a little bit, teeny tiny bit. I started reading the End Times, and I just got done with the Return of Nagash, book one of the End Times. So before we get started, dude, this is so. Comic books are much worse at this, but still, Warhammer lore is also a bit like this, where there's so much retcon and going back, and then like the lore is all over the place, and that some of them are in White Dwarf magazines, some are in fucking army books, some are in real books, some of the books have not become canon anymore, some contradict each other. It's just a mess. So, like, trying to do any lore for Warhammer is kind of tough. But, yeah, so reading the End Times, Return of Nagash, and I've read two End Times books so far. Deathblade, because I read through all of Malice Darkblade's omnibuses, and Deathblade is the last book there. And then Return of Nagash. Deathblade was a tragedy, and terrible, and horrible, and just awful. Return of Nagash was actually quite solid. Maybe the most solid Warhammer book. And Hazel is just jingling her collar a lot. Hazel, come here. I'm gonna take your collar off so you don't ruin this. There. No more collar for you. You're a free puppy! Free puppy! Yay! Yay, free puppy! Anyway. Yeah, no, Return to Nagash is just really good. And also, for context, I entered the Warhammer scene through Total War Warhammer 1. I didn't know anything about Warhammer before that. So I am also actually enjoying the End Times a little bit because it's just like all of the legendary lords I know from the game are in these books. So just kind of, that's a lot of fan service I really like, where it's like, it's that guy from Bretonia! Oh my god, I know who that is! So I'm enjoying that aspect of it. Overall, like an 8 out of 10 read. I did like it. I had very little to complain about. So we'll just go through the plot briefly, and I'll add some funny little anecdotes here and there, but I don't have too much to say on this book, so it'll probably be a shorter lore video. But overall, it was just, like, really good. I just enjoyed it a lot. Alright, start of the End Times, Return of Nagash. I did it a little bit with the whole CA stole every regiment around from this book, but there is a novella called Sigmar's Blood that leads into this. Very briefly, that one was kind of stupid, but I don't I don't blame the Return of Nagash for a novella that came before its inequities, but like, Volkmar the Grim went to go fight Manfred von Karstein in Sylvania, and everyone in this universe knows that vampires can raise an entire army of undead. Like, Vlad almost took Altdorf with a giant army of undead. So people know they can get an army of undead. And Volkmar took, like, literally 80 guys total and tried to charge into Sylvania and got bodied, and then Manfred captured him. So Volkmar is in the custody of Manfred von Karstein to start out this book. So are a couple other people from the Empire, various priests of various gods. Like, there's a priest of Tal, there's a Myrmidia follower from Talea, there's, like, all the gods have someone there. There's a Shalian priest. And then there's also an elf child, and Morgiana, I think is her name, but it's the Fey Enchantress. So the Fey Enchantress is there, and that one bothered me a little bit. Now, again, I started out this video by saying this shit is really hard to keep up with because there's all these, like, no, she didn't just appear there. It was in the White Dwarf copy 128, page 45. There was a little excerpt of a short story, and it's like, oh god, okay, that's impossible. Like, I've gotten all the omnibuses I can by going to Wikipedia and looking up Warhammer books in order, and I've been reading those. But if it's not in those, then I don't know it. Anyway. But the Fey Enchantress is just kind of there, and there was no context in this omnibus that I could find for how she got captured. So the Fey Enchantress is just here too. So all these people are caught by Manfred and held in this castle, Castle Sterniste. And he also apparently just has like 6 or 7 books of Nagash, and he has the Crown of Sorcery. He steals that at the very start of the book. Right. So he doesn't have the Crown of Sorcery yet, but he has like a ton of tools in Nagash. And he's like, I'm Manfred, and my plan is to bring back Nagash, but then at the last second, fuck him over, unexplained way, and take all the power of Nagash for myself and then rule the world. Sounds good? Sounds good. And all of his followers are like, yo, Nagash is way too powerful, you can't control that. And Manfred's like, shut up, nerd. So he launches a quick raid on Altdorf, gets the Crown of Sorcery, gets back to Castle Stranist. Oh yeah, and then that's when Volkmar follows him with like 80 guys and gets bodied. Got it, so we're caught up. So he has the Crown of Nagash. Manfred's like, I'm gonna do a big, super cool plot. And then Balthazar Gelt goes, ha, no, and resurrects the Wall of Faith. A whole bunch of holy icons start floating around Sylvania and locking Manfred in. And Manfred goes, huh. Well, shit! He's just stuck in Sylvania, like, banging on the walls. And all these vampires are showing up because he called them. And you can get in, but you can't get out. So all these vampires are showing up. They're like, Manfred, what do you want? And he's like, I wish I had seen you coming so I could have told you to stay outside the barrier. So all these vampires are getting stuck in Sylvania as more and more pour in to answer Manfred's call because he wants to lead a vampire army to go get the last couple things of Nagash. And then Arkhan the Black shows up. And Manfred's like, well, hey, this is different. What were you doing up in these parts? Aren't you down in Kemmery? And Arkhan goes, nah, I was leading a failed rebellion in Bretonnia. Thought I'd pop over and say hi. Hey, you have a bunch of stuff in Nagash, don't you? And Manfred goes, hey, fuck off, nerds. They have this duel on a bridge. And I have a minor complaint about Arkhan, but we'll get past that. I'll complain later, but remember that I have a minor complaint about Arkhan. So Manfred rolls up to him in Sylvania, the base of his power, and he just starts throwing like spells at Arkhan, and Arkhan's kind of just easily deflecting them all. He just doesn't seem to have much problems. And then even ones that land, he goes, oh, that one landed, but whatever, and he just keeps deflecting other ones. Nothing seems to really hurt him. And Manfred eventually gets tired and goes, what do you want? And while I have complaints about Arkhan, Arkhan is by far my favorite character in this book, because the way he's kind of portrayed in this novel, I don't know about his other novels, but he's just tired. He's extremely tired and wants to die, but he can't disobey the will of Nagash. So he's kind of going through life, but like, he is such a sassy little bitch. The whole book, he's just challenging, like, not challenging them like fight me, but like, whenever Manfred talks to him, he just like teases Manfred a bunch and like directly insults him or whatever. And whenever Manfred's like, I could crush your skull, Arkhan's pretty much like, do it! Dude, just do it, dude. End my suffering. And Manfred backs out, he's like, but I need you. And Arkhan's like, damn it, man! Don't threaten me with a good time. Just kill me. And the whole book he's complaining, he's like, I don't even want to resurrect Nagash. I just want to go to sleep forever, but I guess I will do my job. So, anyway, Manfred asks Arkhan what he wants, and Arkhan's like, I am here to resurrect Nagash, and I know you have like 9 out of the 13 pieces I need. So what are you doing? And Manfred's like, oh, I also want to resurrect Nagash. And Arkhan's like, cool, you want some help? Manfred says no and throws some more spells at him, and Arkhan deflects it like, we've already done this. You know that I'm a strangely very powerful mage. And Manfred's like, fine. So he leads Arkhan back to his castle. Arkhan gives him the last book of Nagash, the one that he carries around all the time. And then he has the Tomb Blade that they will need. So he's good to go. And they go, all right, we need the Fell Blade, which is what cut off Nagash's hand. Oh yeah, Manfred also has the claw of Nagash. Anyway, the Fell Blade cut off Nagash's hand. The Skaven have it. They need the Black Armor of Morkare? The Black Armor of Nagash, that one. It's in an Empire fortress to the north of Sylvania, which... Okay. And then they need... What is in Mosatil Abbey? It's Alakanash, isn't it? Nagash's staff? Okay, yeah. So they need to go to Bretonnia, south to the Skaven, and then they need to go north and grab the Black Armor. So Manfred goes, listen, I'll go fuck up the Skaven. You take some of my vampires and go to Bretonnia. And Arkhan's like, dude, I just failed in Bretonnia. And Manfred's like, well, don't fail this time. And Arkhan's like, got it. So that's a thing. So then they both split off. Arkhan knows how to break the Wall of Faith temporarily. So he takes one of Manfred's precious sacrifices and kills one at the wall to break a minor hole in it quickly. And then they both escape and go on their own business. Now, the book jumps back and forth, but for the sake of this video, I'm just going to tell you one at a time. Manfred's story is much shorter and less goes on, so we'll do that first. Manfred goes south to fight the Skaven. The Fellblade is in the possession of Clan Mordkin. They are undead fighting specialists, which is better handled in other books, actually, now that I think about it. In this one, it doesn't mention at all that they feast on the undead corpses and they're strangely good at killing undead. So when Manfred shows up, they just completely body the Skaven. And again, that's like... I know I'm a Skaven fanboy, so I am trying to couch it. I know I was disappointed that the Skaven didn't put up more of a fight, but that's entirely just like... I like the Skaven, so I want them to do well, less than actual criticism. But I think even beyond my fanboyness, they did roll over a little too easily. And also in this book, it felt like the author was in a hurry, like to just get to something, you know? Where it's like, none of the main characters ever struggled to do anything. They just kind of did it. So Manfred goes south and he encounters a giant Skaven army and he summons a bunch of undead and he beats them. And then he fights a bigger Skaven army. And he says to himself, oh, this one's much bigger. This is going to be really hard. But then you aren't shown him having any difficulty. Like, he still just raises an even bigger army and he just slaughters a bunch of Skaven. And you're like, oh, okay. But then Manfred's like, oof, that was hard. And I'm like, that didn't look hard. You can't just say that was hard, but you didn't actually struggle at all. But whatever. So he keeps pushing south and south into more and more Skaven, and he sees that, like, the world might be ending because there's all these Skaven everywhere. All over the place. The Border Princes are overrun, the Greenskins are even getting pushed back by the Skaven, and the Dwarves are getting locked in their keeps by the Skaven. So Manfred's like, huh, that's not great. He finds the lair of Clan Mordkin pretty easily. He gets down into it pretty easily, and he just starts slaughtering Clan Mordkin in their own base. Their own base of operations, where they have the most followers. Because, like, everyone he kills, he can just resurrect that Skaven and have them fight on his side, which seems pretty overpowered, which, again, I feel like you need to set the limits for your caster. Like, Manfred needs to be, like, struggling. Like, oh, I'm getting tired, or I've used too much magical energy, I can't keep resurrecting these guys, or whatever. And that's actually done way better on Arkhan's side. So, yeah, actually points to Arkhan for that. But anyway, Manfred's just like, none of this is difficult. Slaughtering infinite Skaven. Fine. And then the leader of Clan Mordkin, which I don't even remember his name because he was so pointless. There was a couple mini chapters of him, like, preparing for Manfred. And then he grabs the Fellblade and you're like, dun dun dun, it's the Fellblade. And then when he runs into Manfred, Manfred sees the Fellblade, and this Skaven holding the Fellblade's like, I have the Fellblade. Manfred sees the Fellblade. And then Manfred just goes really fast and instantly beheads him and grabs the Fellblade. That was it. Like, it wasn't... They didn't trade a single blow. He just went, hey, there it is, and went vampire speed and beheaded him. It was like, okay. What was the point? Like, what was the point of the 3 mini chapters building up this Skaven that you're just gonna insta-kill? Like, if he's not a threat, don't make him a plot point, you know? It might be like, well, you need to get the Fellblade. Yeah, but you could be like, focus on Manfred, right? You could focus on Manfred, and he took some vampires with him that I haven't gone into because they're not that important, but, like, he hates some of them, and they're trying to betray him and all this stuff, and all these things, but that plot is really not fleshed out, and they wasted time talking about this Skaven, and there was no resolution to that conflict. The resolution was just, there's the Fellblade. Manfred went really fast and beheaded the Skaven before he even knew it was there. It was like, okay, you didn't need to build up the Skaven. You could have spent way more time on Manfred and this intrigue between him and I think this guy's name is like Marcos, and on and on and on and on and on and on and on. And then, like, Manfred spotted the Skaven that had the Fellblade. The petty warlord thought he was a big deal, like, started this speech, and Manfred cuts him off mid-speech and cuts off his head. Like, something like that. Like, if he's not a big deal, don't build him up to be a big deal, because it just feels like a letdown. So anyway, whatever. Literary complaints aside. Manfred gets the Fellblade and goes home. Halfway home, Marcos, a different vampire, doesn't want Nagash freed, so he tries to betray Manfred, or Manfred bodies his ass. Cool. That was the end. That was the whole arc for Manfred. It was not really that good, now that I think of it. Arkhan's thing is way better. So Arkhan goes back into Bretonnia, and he's like, I literally just failed here. We need to do better this time. So he goes and finds Heinrich Kemmler because he needs a big, big, big army to beat Bretonnia. And unlike Manfred, which That's weird. I went into this rant thinking about it the other way, but we'll get there. Anyway, unlike Manfred, Arkhan's like, I can't control that many undead at the same time. I need a powerful undead caster. I only know one that lives in Bretonnia. So he goes and finds Kemmler. Kemmler is always on board with the plan, but he clearly hates Arkhan. And Arkhan's like, Kemmler was a rambling old man last time I saw him who was barely sane. Now he is crystal clear sane and very powerful. Something's up here, but I don't have time to deal with it. So Arkhan and Kemmler get together, raise a giant army of undead, mostly using Kemmler's strength. Kemmler has a very, very strong affinity for raising undead, but his other magics are pretty weak. So, like, he's a specialist. He's way better than Arkhan at raising undead and controlling them, but Arkhan has a ton of other spells in his repertoire, and Kemmler is just kind of like, meh. You know? Like, even Spirit Leech would be kind of difficult for Kemmler. Anyway. So together they raise this army and they walk around, but Kemmler is getting kind of obsessed with fighting old battles again. Like, he wants to go take it to a local lord he's been fighting their family for, like, generations. He wants to go kill that guy once and for all. Arkhan's like, no, we're busy. And then Kemmler's like, ooh, let's raid some villages that I don't like. And Arkhan's like, no, we're busy. So Kemmler goes along, but he's getting increasingly dissatisfied, and Arkhan can sense it. But Arkhan's also like, why is he tagging along if he's so unhappy? The Kemmler I know would just go off and do his own thing anyway. Something's wrong. And while something is wrong, Malagor Dark Omen is also following them, and the Dark Gods are whispering to him, like, stop those undead, stop them. We don't want that to happen. So Malagor is raising a Beastman army and following them. Malagor occasionally is also raiding castles of Bretonnia and then leaving, and the Bretonians pursue them, and then he leads them to the undead and fucks off, and then the knights charge into the undead. So Arkhan and Kemmler get into a couple skirmishes they really didn't want to deal with. Kemmler actually gets injured for a bit. And they eventually get to this La Mossatil Abbey, but they're weaker and slower than they intended to be. Arkhan's getting increasingly pissed off. But they made it. They made it to this fortress. Now, there are beastmen closing in behind them, and there's Bretonians defending the fortress. There's not a lot of time. Arkhan and Kemmler raise their giant army and go straight towards the fortress. In the fortress is Nagash's staff, which they need. There is a brief battle, and the Bretonians do pretty well, but Arkhan doesn't care too much about the damage he's taking, because he doesn't intend to keep this army. He's just going to grab the staff and, like, run. And they get into the fortress. Krell and Kemmler make a lot of space, but Kemmler at the last second dashes into the fortress. Arkhan pursues him, and they both reach the staff at around the same time, and then Kemmler gives himself over to the Dark Gods, saying, like, I'd rather be a pawn of chaos than a pawn of Nagash. And Arkhan's like, why? And then Kemmler's like, I'm so powerful. And Arkhan's like, why, though? And Arkhan, even in his head, is like, huh, this might be concerning. Kemmler is more powerful than I've ever seen him. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Arkhan's gonna have some issues. And then, similar to the fight with Manfred, Arkhan's like, huh. And then Kemmler just starts lashing him with spells. And Arkhan just tanks it, walks up, grabs the staff, and they're both holding onto the staff. And Kemmler unleashes a whole bunch of spells onto Arkhan, and Arkhan just stands there, like, taking them, not really counterattacking too much, just like, whatever. And eventually, the chaos powers that Kemmler got rip him apart from the inside and kill him off. And Arkhan's like, well, whatever, and walks up the staff, and I'm like, that is the second fight in a row where Arkhan is just sat there and taken it, and somehow won by just existing. And I don't think that's a known power of his. It's not like he has this amulet or something, or he has insane magical resistance, so people are being stupid by throwing spells at him. It's like, it seems like just in this book, the writer is like, he can't lose this fight, but won't show you him winning it. It just kind of shows him taking damage and the other guy dying. Like, Manfred got too tired to keep throwing spells at him. Kemmler got ripped apart from the inside by chaos, and Arkhan existed. So whatever. Arkhan gets the staff, runs away, takes a little bit of his army with him, but most of them just fall dead on the spot. And he runs from Bretonnia to get back to Castle Sternest in Sylvania, regroup with Manfred. On his way back home, Malagor keeps pursuing him, but Arkhan always manages to stay a step ahead. He even at one point has to sacrifice Krell, where he just sends Krell backwards into the army of the Beastmen. And Krell 1v1,000,000 fights them, and he just keeps fighting, and the Beastmen stop and keep challenging him, like, you know, this Doom Bull wants to fight him. Krell kills the Doom Bull. This Centaur chieftain wants to fight him. Krell kills that. This War Chief wants to fight him. And, like, the rest of the Beastmen army stands around cheering as Krell bodies one after one of their leaders. But the whole army is standing there, and Malagor is like, keep moving! And all the Beastmen are like, no. So Arkhan and his army that remains get away while all the Beastmen stand around a 1v1 Krell forever. And we don't know what happens to Krell. Maybe he'll show back up later. I actually don't know yet. But that's where they left him. So Arkhan gets away. Manfred, one of his vampires that was accompanying Arkhan, tries to betray him because he wants to... His plan was to steal the staff and get it back to Manfred without Arkhan. Arkhan easily deflects that. And one of Manfred's other vampires, who's a lesser character, is like, nah, I won't betray you like that guy because I don't want to. So they get back to Castle Sternest. Arkhan meets up with Manfred. They collect all their stuff, and they go, hey, we have everything, except for that black armor. Manfred's like, neat. Let's go get it. Now, elsewhere in the world, that elf child I mentioned that Manfred's holding as one of his sacrifices for Nagash is actually the secret child of Tyrion and Alariel. So Tyrion asks Eltharion the Grim to go get her, which, again, going back to the first thing I said in this video, it is very hard to find a straight line answer of Warhammer lore. The last I saw of Eltharion in my readings was during the second invasion of Ulthuan video. Eltharion did not seem to like Tyrion. They were friends in the past, but something had happened, and then Eltharion became a dickhead. And during the second siege of Ulthuan by the Dark Elves, Eltharion was just, like, doing whatever, but Tyrion couldn't really talk to him too much, and whenever he tried to, he's just, like, the narration from Tyrion's point of view was, like, it was like talking to a wall of ice. Eltharion just seemed to want the conversation to be over. And that never got resolved. Like, they were never friends again. So I don't know why in this book they all of a sudden seem to be best buds. But Eltharion's going to undertake this mission just for Tyrion. Takes some elven mages and a small force of elite troops and goes to get her. So Eltharion stops in at Altdorf. Talks to Karl Franz. He's like, hey man, there's a vampire in the south and he has a very important elven child. And Karl Franz is like, dude, I have way more important stuff to be doing right now. Like, chaos is pouring in from the north. Kislev is entirely gone, and the northern part of my empire is getting attacked in, like, 4 places by armies. I can't go fight vampires right now because of one elf. And Eltharion's like, you know what? Fair enough. And he just sits around in Altdorf for a while. So, back in the south, there's this fortress that's on the northern border of Sylvania. That holds the black armor of Nagash. And at this fort is, like, the relative of Marius Leitdorf. He's this other guy, Leitdorf, the leader of these Knights of the Sigmar's Blood. They're sitting right outside the Wall of Faith that Gelt erected that Manfred can't get through normally. And he's just like, yeah, okay, we're here. And my question is, hey, Empire, if you got a super powerful undead artifact of Nagash, why did you store it literally outside of the province that is most known for undead happenings? Like, why wouldn't you hold this in, like, Altdorf or Marienburg or Nordland or, like, anywhere else? Anywhere else, but in a random fortress just outside Sylvania. Because it's not helping you. It's not like, you know, I get the risk versus reward where it's like, oh, we stole, I'm making this up, but oh, we stole Nagash's ring. And while it's really powerful undead, it's also really powerful against undead. So, risk versus reward. This is like, no, we just keep this armor in a dark room locked up right next to Sylvania. Okay, not great. So Manfred and Arkhan charge it. They get through the barrier again. There's a brief battle, but Manfred didn't actually want to win the battle. He flies with some Vargeists and some flying steeds over the battlefield into the keep. When the enemy knights ride out to just run down the undead in open combat, they do that and it's great, but then they get flown over and they're like, whoopsie, we didn't defend the keep. Manfred sneaks in, steals the armor, runs away. Now that Leitdorf guy, who runs the thing, the fortress, goes north to Karl Franz to get some help. Franz says, I know where you could get a tiny army. And he sends the High Elves with Leitdorf, where he introduced the High Elves. He's like, good news! I found the reinforcements you wanted, High Elves. And the High Elves are like, great, thank you for giving us all these knights. And then he turns to the knights and he's like, I have requisitioned this elite group of High Elves to help you fight the vampires. And Leitdorf's like, great, okay. So Karl Franz solves 2 problems of his, gets them both out of his hair. He does actually help both of them in a way, but Franz is crafty. Yay! So those guys go south. They also send a letter to Ungrim Ironfist, who's up in the Dwarven Mountains, and he's like, hey, can you bring an army? And Ungrim's like, sure. Now, Malagor is in trouble because he let Arkhan go. I mean, let is a strong word, but Arkhan got away from him. So all the Dark Gods are like, hey, Malagor, you dipshit, get it together. And the Dark Gods summon the largest Beastman army ever made to help Malagor. And then the Wood Elves on the other side are like, let's send a little Black Ops spec team to go steal that lady back. So Manfred now has a teeny tiny contingent of Wood Elves, a combined army of High Elves and Empire, a huge Dwarven army, and a huge massive Beastman army coming at him all at the same time. And Manfred just kind of steeples his fingers and he's like, I have a plan. So he sends a little group of vampire knights to poke the Beastmen, and then the Beastmen run after him, the knights run away towards the dwarves. And every time the Beastmen lose interest, they get attacked again, and then get driven towards the dwarves. So Manfred baits Malagor's giant army into slamming into Ungrim Ironfist's giant army. And Malagor is actively trying to stop them, but the Beastmen aren't listening to him because they're too busy getting mad and running around. So eventually, he just has to join the fight. Ungrim bodies the Beastmen, but loses a lot of dwarves in the process because the Beastman army is so massive, and he's like, we have just scored the greatest victory the dwarves have ever seen, and it didn't matter. Well, let's go home because we're too injured, but damn. So the dwarves shuffle off home with what remains of their super tattered army. The Beastmen are entirely routed. One Banshee solos the entire Wood Elf Spec Ops force, which I don't know what the point of the Wood Elves was. Like, again, it's kind of like the Skaven Lord. There was 3 little mini chapters about the Wood Elves, and then one Banshee finds them, bodies them, and sends them running. It's like, okay, what was the point? So it's down to Eltharion and the Empire to stop Manfred and Arkhan from raising Nagash. Arkhan gets into this circle, and he starts summoning Nagash with all the stuff. Manfred's going to protect him with an army, and the High Elves and the Empire are rushing to get over there. Now, the Imperial guy gets ahead of the High Elves because the High Elves are taking way too long, which it seems like both sides have a point. Like, Leitdorf was right, they need to go faster, but Eltharion was right that rushing into a trap is bad. So Leitdorf runs off, rushes headlong into a trap all by himself and gets murdered, along with his knights. And Eltharion takes it nice and slow, but gets to the ritual site of the undead as it is happening. So there's no real time to plan anything, he just has to charge. Manfred rides out to meet him. Now, Arkhan gathers up the Fey Enchantress and Volkmar and the remaining sacrifices. And Volkmar has Sigmar's blood in him, and since Sigmar fucked with Nagash a long time ago, the easiest way to bring him back is to find an heir. So he's like, aha, you! Puts the black armor on him, makes him into, like, a voodoo doll for Nagash, and puts him in a cauldron of all the other sacrifices' blood. Including the Fey Enchantress, which I skipped over this because I forget where exactly it happened, but at one point, she made Arkhan go a little crazy and remember his past life and remember Neferata and stuff, and then the Fey Enchantress was like, hey, Arkhan, you want a bone? And Arkhan's like, yeah, I guess. And then she turned on him and, like, was trying to kill him and escape or something. It was just really, it was kind of odd. I mean, it made sense, but it was just an odd little subplot. So he runs into her again. He's like, hey, when Nagash comes back, I won't resurrect you, so you can just sleep peacefully. And she's like, why would you do that? And he's like, because remember when we were gonna bone? That was neat. I liked feeling romance again, even if it was a lie to just stab me in the chest. It was cool. I liked feeling that feel. So, thumbs up. And and Fey Enchantress was like, whatever, sure, just kill me, dude. So he does. Anyway. The battle's going on. Arkhan is getting really close to summoning Nagash through Volkmar. Volkmar is screaming in a lot of pain. And Manfred did send a vampire to go kill Arkhan, so it disrupt the ritual, so he could resurrect Nagash on his own terms, which the terms are vague. But whatever. She is gonna stab Arkhan, and then Arkhan looks at her super cool while he's still doing the ritual. He's like, I love Arkhan in this book. He's so funny. But he just looks at her and he's like, that vampire you really love is gonna die. And she's like, what? How could you know that? And he's like, Lady, I'm a 2,000-year-old lich. I'm literally trying to resummon Nagash right now. Like, I just murdered the Fey Enchantress. Do you think that looking about 1,000 yards in one direction is impossible for me? Like, you've seen me do so much more impossible shit than just looking over there. Like, trust me, he's in danger. And she goes, yeah, you right, and runs off instead of killing him because she's so worried about this other vampire she loves. It's not even a B plot, it's like a C plot that she loves this vampire. And Arkhan's like, ha, nerd, and keeps doing his own thing. And I'm sitting there like, I mean, he could have just lied to you. Like, you can't see it. For all you know, you're about to get over there and your boyfriend's gonna be fine. So she gets over there. Her boyfriend is actually getting murdered by a high elf, so she runs in and saves him, saves her boyfriend, and then they share a long smooch. And Manfred is like, wait, I sent you to kill Arkhan. And she's like, I'm in love. And Manfred's like, yeah, but I sent you to kill Arkhan. Like, dude, that is way more important. Nagash is coming back. Fuck. And Manfred runs through the battlefield, trying to get back to the stone circle. And he gets impaled 10 times through the chest by these big old talons as Stormwing, Eltharion's mount, hits him from behind and just, like, all of its claws goes straight through his chest. And he's like, oh, God, that hurts. That is a painful thing that is happening to me. So, Eltharion drags him off of his horse, slams him into the ground, and then Manfred stabs Stormwing in the chest, and then Stormwing dies. So Eltharion rolls off, and he starts fighting with Manfred, and he is by far Manfred's superior in melee combat, much to the vampire's chagrin, as he keeps trying to bait Eltharion into getting mad, making a mistake, and Eltharion, every time he says something super insulting to Eltharion does push him harder, but in this very calm and cold way of just like a wall slowly trying to crush you against a rock. So Manfred's getting very, very upset, and he eventually finds some space to cast a spell that will kill Eltharion. He lets Eltharion cut off one of his arms. So, like, normally that would be a mistake, but Manfred's busy casting this spell with his other hand that'll kill Eltharion. So he's like, I'll sacrifice my hand to get you. But Stormwing, who we thought was dead, pops up, gets in the way of Manfred, stabs him in the chest again. He's like, oh, again! But also the spell hits Stormwing in the face, and this time Stormwing is dead for real. And Manfred's like, so, let me get this straight. You stabbed me through the chest, and then I stabbed you in the heart. You died. For real this time. Well, not for real this time, but, like, you died. And then I'm doing another thing that'll kill your stupid master. And then you stab me through the chest, and then I kill you for real this time. Like, stop coming back. So he's kicking Stormwing. And then Eltharion gets between him and Nagash's resurrection thing. And Manfred's like, you're in my way. And Eltharion goes, fuck you, idiot. And Eltharion runs away. And Manfred's like, no! And Eltharion gets up to Arkhan's area. And I actually laughed out loud at this part. So Eltharion runs into this barrier, and he's like, oh, there's a barrier here. And he doesn't seem too concerned. And Manfred's like, ha! You fool! Arkhan has a barrier up! You can't get through it! And Eltharion just sticks his sword into the barrier, and since it's like a magic item, it goes right through, and he uses it as like a crowbar to open a hole and walks through, and it closes behind him. And then Manfred gets up there and is like pounding on the walls. He's like, wait, I can't get through. And I'm like, yeah. So 2 seconds ago, he's like, ha, idiot, you can't get through. Now he's just stuck. So Eltharion walks up to Arkhan, and this is the final time that Arkhan gets in a fight. But Arkhan's like not facing him, and Eltharion walks up and just like starts strangling Arkhan. And I'm really confused, because Arkhan doesn't need to breathe. So Eltharion's just strangling Arkhan, and Arkhan says, let me go. Like, let me go, you fool. And Eltharion goes, no. And he keeps strangling him, and Arkhan's like, whatever. And just puts his hand on Eltharion's forearm. And Eltharion's, like, armor starts to crumble away, and his skin starts to wrinkle, and his hair turns white, and he continues to strangle Arkhan. And then Arkhan just holds him for a while, and eventually Eltharion turns into dust. And I'm like, What the fuck was that? Like, so far I've been enjoying this book. I've had minor nitpicks here and there, but that is one part where I was actually like, what was the point of this? What are we doing here? So Eltharion did the stupidest thing to do to a skeleton and try and cut off his oxygen supply, I guess. Like, he didn't try to snap his neck. He didn't, like, try to do blunt force damage. He didn't slap off any of his arms or, like, anything. He just tried to strangle him, and when that wasn't working, he just held position and kept doing that until he died. That's... Wow, that's a cool way for Eltharion to die. That's sweet, dude. Okay. And then Arkhan's able to just touch you and you just explode into age and dust. That's also cool. And that wraps up what I've been alluding to. Arkhan is strangely overpowered. Now, I entered this video wanting to mention that, but then I forgot that Manfred actually has more of an overpowered arc versus the Skaven where just nothing bothers him. But Arkhan is a little frustrating because he keeps indicating he has limits, but he always overcomes them. Like, he needed Kemmler to raise the giant army, but when Kemmler got taken over by the Chaos Gods and ran inside, he lost his ability to control the undead. But Arkhan just takes over the whole army, and he says it's difficult, and he says it strains on him. But then when he goes and fights Kemmler, it's not like he's tired. So in the moment, it was difficult, but then it's fine. And I do have an issue with how Arkhan's portrayed in this book, because he just, like, all of his fights are just... He just tanks spells and eventually outlasts the other person every single time. But it doesn't look like he has a lot of skill. Like, the book implies he has a lot of skill, but doesn't show you he does. He just gets battered by these spells until the other guy gets sleepy. And you're like, okay. And then this final fight, Eltharion gets through everything, gets up to him, and could kill him at any moment. But he just doesn't. He just does the stupidest thing possible, and then Arkhan, like, touches him and he disintegrates. Okay, so am I to infer that Arkhan can touch anyone and they disintegrate? Well, that's overpowered. And he's apparently tanky. And he can see the future. And he's a decent melee combat. Like, it's just kind of power creep where I'm like, okay, well, Arkhan's just the best at everything then. So, I don't know. Minor complaint, but Arkhan's power levels were ill-defined. So, he's trying to resurrect Nagash. Manfred's banging on the walls saying, dude, don't do it! You can't let him come back! And Arkhan's like, I don't know what you hope to accomplish, Manfred. Because without me, Nagash couldn't rise. And if you killed me... So yeah, if you killed me, Nagash wouldn't show up at all. And if you let me raise him, you can't control him. Like, what was your plan? And Manfred realizes that there's a voice that's been talking to him throughout the book. So he goes, huh. I think that voice was Nagash. And Nagash shows up and he's like, hey, I'm back, baby. And Manfred's like, okay. Love you, Dad. And Nagash goes, yeah, you do. And everybody bows. The elves are routed. They failed in their mission because their little daughter lady was killed to resurrect Nagash, and now he's back. And then the epilogue, Nagash is just torturing Manfred for no reason because he's like, hey, I don't like you. And Manfred's like, why, Dad? Why? And Nagash is like, you know I could see everything you were doing, right? The parts where you said you were going to, like, chain me forever. And he rips out a chunk of Manfred's chest and he just drops it on the ground. And then it forms back into Vlad von Karstein. And Vlad's like, I'm back! And then Manfred wants to stab him. And Nagash lets it happen for a little bit. And then when Vlad is about to kill Manfred because he destroyed him in melee combat, Nagash is like, alright, stop it, knock it off. We have shit to do. So yeah. That was the Return of Nagash. It was pretty solid. The plot lines were overall pretty good. I liked seeing a lot of legendary lords running around. It was fun. It was nice. There were a couple dumb things, but I really enjoyed it. So, I guess my start to the End Times was Deathblade, but chronologically, the start of the End Times, I enjoyed this one. It was good. Okay, bye.
Roar. Subscribe, yes.